Hi, Mike Kennedy with you. The basis for this Hamas-Israeli war and all kinds of different conflicts in the area is based on this false alternative history that doesn't exist, that's promoted by Islam. We read the Quran, talk to Muslims. They believe that all of the people in the Bible were Muslims, at least in the Old Testament. And somehow, we get to the New Testament, and somehow, at some point, maybe it was in the Old Testament too, this isn't completely clear because it's kind of made up, these Jews got in and took over everything. So this population came in and replaced everyone. And I assume drew the Muslims out. But in reality, we know there were no Muslims before the year 620, when supposedly Muhammad existed, and over I think it's 22-year period, he got these revelations. The angel Gabriel would come to him, tell him this verse. He'd memorize it. He didn't read or write, which is in the Quran. And he would have other people memorize it. The Quran was primarily to be memorized. It even rhymes, but not in our language when it's translated, but in supposedly in the original Arabic. And but there's all kinds of errors here, historic errors. The Quran itself now, scholars are talking about a proto-Quran. In other words, there's a lot of material in the Quran that was basically copied out of other religious books of the time. An example of this is them picking up stories from lectionaries. Now, what's a lectionary? That's a book Christians would use, and it would have different prayers and things in it, things that you're going to use in most likely a church service or something like that, but it's written down, it's standardized, and a lot of that material ends up getting into the Quran, but it's mistranslated because that's usually in Aramaic, which is similar but not exactly the same as Arabic. And there's a translational problem, but some people believe as many as 20% of the verses in the Quran are from these, calling them a proto-Quran, but from Christian sources. But they also take from mythical things. Now, I've been trying to figure out how to explain this, but could you imagine if we have this guy comes on the scene today, he says that he has some verses he uses in the Bible, and he says, well, I've got the updated version here. I'm the new prophet. You should follow me and believe what I believe. And you think some people are going to say, right, oh, well, we should check it out, right? So you start reading this, and you're reading the story of the God, Jesus, because every religion says something about Jesus usually, but the Christianity doesn't validate any of the other religions. It's the other way around. But so you're reading this thing, and you read about the little drummer boy, coming with his tom, 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 pum, 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 that, the drummer boy. And you're thinking, wait a second, that's made up. That's just part of, warm, fuzzy type things they made up. And I don't know, I'll just say the drummer boy didn't even exist till 1935 or something. And you know that, and so you're saying, well, there's a big error in here because it's got the drummer boy in it, and that's supposed to be telling me that's just as valid as the other verses that are talking about Jesus or, Aaron, Moses, whoever you're talking about. And that presents a big problem. And we find a lot of verses like that in the Quran that are talking about things that weren't considered actual events, but were just kind of made up for different purposes, whether it was for entertainment or to show some point. The story of the little drummer boy obviously has a point to it. And you know, that's how some of these things creep in. But so anyway, you know, we're talking about Gaza now. The Gaza Strip, they say they're Palestinians, but they can't be Palestinians because, you know, the country of Palestine, no country of Palestine ever existed. Now, the area around Gaza was the area where the Philistines were. And technically, if you say Palestine, you're saying that the country of the Philistines. Now, Philistines were pretty well wiped out. They were an ancient enemy of Israel, but they basically bought it when Nebuchadnezzar took over the what we would call, you know, that area, maybe call it the Holy Land or something, Israel and those other countries around there. And he just snuffed the Philistines out. But, you know, archaeology, we're looking at archaeology and the Gaza Strip and things like that, and they found mass graves, you know, graves of people, and also they found graves, I mean, a large amount of bones from pigs and bones from dogs. So archaeologically, it's pretty certain that these people who lived in the Gaza Strip at one time ate pork and ate dogs. And if you know anything about Islam and Judaism too, you know, pork is a big no-no. Now, dogs are considered, I don't know where dogs stand in Judaism, but in Muslim, they're considered extremely unclean animals. And, you know, the only odd thing in my work experience that ever happened with a Muslim was someone brought their dog in and it brushed against a Muslim woman's coat, and she kind of demanded that the coat be cleaned, you know, sent to a dry cleaner and cleaned, because they believe these animals are unclean. So they certainly wouldn't be eating them. So the idea that these people were Muslims obeying some type of dietary law from, you know, scriptures and things that they had, you know, kind of falls apart. And then genetically, they look at these people, and again, it doesn't match with people in the area. It actually matches, and so does the pottery, into people from the Aegean Sea area, which is, you know, around Spain and France, that area. And that's where they believe these people, the Philistines, actually came from. And, you know, if Philistines want their homeland, if Palestinians want their homeland, they got to go back to Spain or France or some area over there. But it's not, you know, the idea that they were always there just isn't true. Because in final analysis, no one was ever always there. I don't care who you're talking about. People have migrated. They always migrate. They always have wars. They always horrible things that mankind's done. But that's the history of mankind, and pretending that didn't happen is kind of naive. So we have the situation now where we know that these people that call themselves Palestinians, you know, typically, you know, and before 1960, when you said the word Palestinians or Palestine, you were talking about Jews, Christians, and Muslims. You're grouping them all together. And now it's a term exclusively, basically used for Arab Muslims in that area. And it's kind of like they've used these titles so many times that people have accepted them, even though, like I say, they're based on a false narrative of history that just never existed. But we've talked a lot about that. We've talked, you know, on this channel and other channels, and I might do a review of some of this material that, you know, Mecca is not an ancient city. It's talked quite a bit about in the Quran and in Islam, and Mecca just isn't really that old. I mean, they can't even date it to 0 BC, let alone, you know, a couple thousand years earlier with Abraham and things like that, which the Quran does say, you know, that Abraham went to Mecca, and, you know, all these trade routes were centered around Mecca. We can't find any evidence of history in that. There's no artifacts that have ever been dug up in Mecca. I'll tell you, that place has undergone extensive digs and constructions. And in a place like Jerusalem, that we found things that are 5,000 years old. You know, articles that can be dated. Now, that predates the Jewish people quite a bit being there. So, but we don't have that same thing with Mecca. It seems to be, we have this narrative, standard Islamic narrative, they call it, and it just doesn't fit history. So we have all of these types of things, and it just doesn't match reality, the things that people are claiming. And the people are all whipped up that Israel is the oppressor, apartheid, and all these crazy things, when is an absolute fact that if you're a Muslim, you have more freedom in Israel and Israel-controlled territories than you do in many Muslim countries. Like, Israel doesn't care what kind of Muslim you are. They don't care what kind of Christian you are. If you want to go 1 week to a mosque, the second week to a synagogue, and the third week to a Christian church, you can do it. I mean, you can't do that in a real Islamic country that has a theocracy. That's just not going to go well for you at all. Like, you might even be executed. But, so there we have it. There's all of these things that are being said. And the poor Palestinians have all, will use that term since they're using it, but it's incorrect. We have these people that have been used as pawns of terrorist groups. When I was younger, it was the PLO. Now that I'm older, it's Hamas. And they have no real concern for the Palestinian people at all. They're just pawns to be used to wage war against Israel. Because if you look in the Quran and what these terrorists believe, they want every Jew on the face of the earth dead. That's one of their goals. And after them, they come for the Christians after that, if they get that far. But, so there we have it. It just isn't, people are, politicians are getting some sticky positions on other people, because people are saying, like, well, do you condemn, these 1,400 people or something were killed when Hamas first entered Israel? Horrific things, rapes, murders, beheading of infants, really horrible stuff. And they ask a politician if that's justified. And basically they kind of get, well, I'm always against violence, but you have to see it in context. And so this is the idea that since Israel is occupying their land, since Israel is so oppressive to their belief system, that anything they do as their resistance is valid. And that's like, other people don't do that. We believe, even in war, that there are certain rules you have to follow in laws, but what you do with prisoners and different things like that, and it's just it just doesn't work. So there we go. Ask some questions if you want, but there's extensive material that you can look at about all of these things, and just the idea that the Palestinians have been raised in a pressure cooker, basically, with not a lot of outside input being let in, and huge billions of dollars have gone to the Gaza area, and they built tunnels with them rather than providing medical care and schooling and all these different things they could be doing to improve the life of their people. Because actually, and this, you won't believe this, but I think this is true, Hamas, we know, use civilians as human shields, and they have two purposes in that. They want civilians killed, so they can say Israel killed civilians, and they want to gain, they're using them for protection too. So that's basically the idea behind the human shields. You either want them to protect you, or you want them to be killed, so that you can use that as saying, oh, gee, yeah, we only killed 1,400 people, but the Israelis have killed 12,000 or something. But that, and the one last thing I'll mention is, oh, Israel is killing all these children. And it's like, well, wait a second. If you give a 12-year-old, munitions, hand grenades, assault rifles and all of these different things, and you point them in the direction of Israeli troops and say, go get him, he is going to be shot. He's acting as an adult there, not as a child. And that's the fault of Hamas, not the fault of the Israelis. If there are children actively fighting against Israel with weapons, you know what the outcome's going to be, because again, Hamas is really, except for the tunnel system, that's their one thing they've kind of got that's really good. But all their other weapons and things like that, they're in the, they're decades and decades behind anything Israeli has. And that's just the way it is. Bye.